Scenes from the dresser. He does nothing but cry. Are they keeping him in? Well, they wouldn't let me stay. The doctor said I seem to be making matters worse. I shouldn't have taken him to the hospital. I don't know what came over me. I should have brought him back here where he belongs. Why is his coat on the floor and his hat were drying out, they're wet through? Sodden, if you don't mind my saying so. So was he, drenched, sweat and drizzle. How did he come to be in such a state, Norman? When you telephoned, I thought at first he'd been hurt in the air raid. No. Or had an accident. No, not an accident. No, I know, because they said there was no sign of physical injury. Your ladyship, he's in a state of collapse. I know. How did he get like that? Your ladyship. What happened to him? Sit down, please, please sit down. We have to remain calm, not to say clear-headed. The doctor said it must have been coming on for weeks, if not longer. I didn't see him this morning. He left the digs before I woke. Where was he all day? Where did you find him, Norman? Well, what happened was this, your ladyship. After the last all clear sounded, I went into Market Square as dusk was coming on. A peculiar light, ever so yellowish, smoke and dust rising from the bomb craters, running shadows full of the unexpected. I had hoped to find a packet or two of Brown and Paulson's cornflour, since our supplies are rather low and the stuff scarce, and you never know. So I was asking at this stall and that, when I heard his voice. Whose voice? Was hers, of course. I turned and saw him by the candlemaker who was shutting up shop for the night. He was lit by one tall tallow candle which was guttering, and he looked like that painting of him as Lear, all greens and dark blues, seen through this peculiar light. He was taking off his overcoat in this weather. God help the man who stops me, he shouted, and threw the coat to the ground, just like Lear in the storm scene. Look at it. I don't know if I'll ever get it clean. And he was so proud of it. Do you remember? Oh, perhaps it was before your time. The first Canadian tour, Toronto, raglan sleeves, fur collar. Now look at it. Well, what happened after he took off his coat? Started on the hat. Duns, Piccadilly. Only a year ago, down on the coat it went, and he jumped on it. Stamped on his hat, viciously stamped on his hat. Well, you can see he lifted both hands as he does to convey sterility into Goneril's womb, and called out, "How much further do you want me to go?" His hands were all of a fidget, undoing his jacket, loosening his collar and tie, and tearing at the buttons of his shirt. Were there many people about? A small crowd. That's why I ran to him. I didn't want him to stand there looking ridiculous with people all around, sniggering. Did he see you? Did he know who you were? I didn't wait to find out. I just took his hand and said, "Good evening, sir. Shouldn't we be getting to the theatre?" In my best nanny voice, the one I use when he's being wayward. He paid no attention. He was shivering. His whole body seemed to be shivering and trembling, and such a trembling. Well, you shouldn't have let the public see him like that. Oh, it's easy to be wise after the event, if you don't mind my saying so, your ladyship. But I tried to spirit him away. Not easy with a man of his proportions. Only just then, a woman approached, quite old, wearing bombazine under a tweed coat, but perfectly respectable. She picked up his clothes and wanted to help him dress. I just stood there amazed, utterly amazed. He said to the woman, "Oh, thank you, my dear. But Norman usually looks after me. I'd be lost without Norman." So I thought to myself, this is your cue, ducky. I said, "I'm Norman. I'm his dresser. The woman, she had her hair in curlers, took his hand and kissed it, saying, "You were lovely in the Corsican brothers." He looked at her a long while, smiled sweetly, you know the way he does when he's wanted to charm, and said, "Thank you, my dear, but you must excuse me, I have to make an exit," and ran off. He said, "I have to make an exit." Well, of course I ran after him, fearing the worst. I didn't know he could run so fast. I just followed a trail of discarded clothing, jacket, waistcoat, and thought, we can't have Sir doing a striptease around the town. But then I found him leaning up against a lamp post, weeping. Where? Outside the Cardoma. Without a word, hardly knowing what I was doing, I led him to the hospital. The sister didn't recognise him, although later she said she'd seen him as Othello last night. A doctor was summoned, short, bald, bespectacled, and I was excluded by the drawing of screens. And then you telephoned me? No, I waited, I lurked, as Edmund says, and heard the doctor whisper, "This man is exhausted. This man is in a state of collapse." And then the sister came out and said, "I must fetch you at once." That's when I telephoned, and that's how it happened. He did nothing but cry, yes, she said. I left him lying on top of the bed, still in his clothes, crying, no, weeping, as though he had lost control, had no choice, wept and wept, floodgates. What are we to do? In just over an hour, there'll be an audience in this theatre hoping to see him as King Lear. What am I to do? Well, don't upset yourself for a start. I've never had to make this sort of decision before, any kind of decision before. As soon as I came out of the hospital, I telephoned Madge and asked her to meet me here as soon as possible. She'll know what to do. Oh, yes, Madge will know what to do. She won't upset herself, that's for certain. Madge will be ever so sensible. Of course, stage managers have to be. I had a friend once, had been a vicar before falling from the pulpit and landing on the stage. Ever so good as an ugly sister to the manner born. His wife didn't upset easily, just as well, I suppose, all things considered. Madge reminds me of her. Cold, businesslike, boring. A short speech from Norman later in the play as he's trying to get Sir ready for the evening performance. Shall we begin at the beginning? Good evening, sir. Good evening, Norman, and how are you this evening, sir? A little tearful, I'm afraid, and you, Norman, I'm very well, thank you, sir. Had ever such a quiet day, cleaning your wig and beard, ironing your costumes, washing your undies, and what have you been up to, sir? Oh, I've been jumping on my hat, Norman, have you? That's an odd thing to do. May one ask why? Why what, Norman? Why you've been jumping on your hat, sir? Not much fun for me. This conversation, not much fun for you either, I suspect. Are you going to sulk all evening, or are we going to speak to our servants? I do wish you'd stop crying, sir. Shall we play I Spy? I spy with my little eye something beginning with A. I know you won't guess, so I'll tell you. A is for actor. And actors have to work, and actors have to put on their makeup and change their frocks, and then, of course, actors have to act. Zounds, madam, where dost thou get this knowledge? From a baboon, sir, that wandered wild in Eden, or words to that effect. Oh, I've never known a kettle take so long to boil. I tell you what, have a little brandy, break the rules, have a nip. A little brandy won't harm, as the surgeon said to the undertaker's widow. There's less than an hour to go. You usually want longer. Shall we make a start? Yes, it's me, Norman, the one with the soulful eyes. I've saved my rations for you. I don't mind going without. Drink up. It's tea, not rat poison. There, that's better, isn't it? Isn't it? Would you like a bicky? I've saved one for the mayor's reception in Bridlington. No? Oh, why don't you have one then, Norman? Oh, thanks very much, I will. If you don't mind me saying so, sir, there seems little point in discharging yourself from the hospital and coming here to sit like Niobe prior to being turned into stone. So shall we make an effort? Further speech into the play in the second half. I'm pleased you're pleased. I've never known you not to complain when you've really been at it, and tonight one could say without fear of contradiction, you were at it. Rest now. You've all the interval and all Gloucester's blinding before. No, they cannot touch me for coining. Try to sleep. You've been through it or put through it, whichever you prefer, and you need quiet, as the deaf mute said to the piano tuner. Oh, mighty, her ladyship thought you were tonight. That's what she said. That was the word she used, mighty. Of course, I cannot comment on the storm scene, but I did hear, oh, reason not the need. Tremble making. I have never seen you so full of the real thing. If you don't mind my saying so, sir. And wasn't Geoffrey agile as fool? For a man of his age, kept well downstage, never once got in your light, much less obtrusive than Mr. Davenport Scott in every way. And here's something funny. In the storm scene, when we were beating ourselves delirious, and I was having to jump between thunder sheet and timpani like a juggler with rubber balls and Indian clubs, Mr. Oxenby came to our aid, uninvited, cracked and clapped, he did, with abandon. Not a word said, just gave assistance when assistance was needed. And afterwards, just before the interval, I thanked him. Get stuffed, he said, which wasn't nice, and added scornfully, I don't know why I helped. And I said, because we're a band of brothers, and you're one of us in spite of yourself. I did, that's what I said, quite unabashed. He hobbled away, head down, and if he was given to muttering, he'd have muttered darkly, More tea? Are you asleep, sir?